Have you found your dream job as a developer? Or are you stuck in an unfulfilling job? On WeAreDevelopers.com, you find over 1,000 jobs in Europe that fit the tech stack that you want to work with, and salaries go up to $130K. All you have to do is create a free profile, and you automatically get matched with jobs that fit your requirements. So what are you waiting for? Create your free profile and let companies apply to you now.
Zeiss?
I think you should go to Zeiss.
Zeiss Digital Partners.
Be amazed of knowledge, industries, manufacturing, optics, hardware, software,
AR, VR,
Machine Learning,
infrastructure.
Ich will nicht aufstehen und irgendwie mir denken, scheiße, ich muss meinen Job machen, sondern was kann ich heute machen?
You will make it happen. Do it.
Hello? Yeah? Working. Oh, great. Hello, everyone, and welcome to WeAreDeveloper World Congress. Join me. Woo! I'm very excited to have you all here with us after 2 years with COVID. We're finally meeting here face-to-face, so I'm very excited to be here. My name is Karen Kenzie. I'm a senior software engineer at Tori, and I'm also a tech community manager in Israel. I'm very excited to be here, and I want to thank you for attending the sessions. And I'm also want to say thanks to our partners, media partners, and community partners. I want to encourage you to download the World Congress, WeAreDeveloper World Congress app. You have there a section when you can ask Q&A questions, so feel free to use it. There are also, regarding food and coffee, there are free water and coffee over in the expo area, so you are welcome to drink. And if you want, there are also snacks, food, and everything you need just in this place. So before we get started, I want to introduce the Code of Conduct video. So please join me in seeing this short video. Don't worry, it is once a day video. Let's see it. So enjoy the show. Just out of curiosity, how many of you are using React? Raise your hand. Wow, a lot of React developers. Vue? Angular? A close. I think React is taking the first place, if I'm not mistaken. So I want to welcome to the stage Rainer. He's going to talk about the future of front-end development and talk about the big three, React, Vue, and Angular. Enjoy. Don't forget, if you have any question for Rainer, you can write them down in the Q&A in the app. Enjoy.
Okay, so hello, good morning also from my side. So my name is Rainer. I am a member of Angular Architects, so this means we are doing consulting and training in the area of Angular. And this also means that I spend most of my time working with Angular, but of course we also have to understand what's going on outside of Angular, obviously. And I am also somebody who really likes to play with new libraries, new frameworks. And this is actually why I came up with the idea for this talk, the future of front-end development. So what I want to do is that I want, based of course on, it's also an opinionated talk, but based on my experience, research, but also data, I want to give an overview of what's currently going on, what we can expect, and if there is something where you could say this is something that you can prepare for. And there is a nice saying, if we want to know where we are going to, we need to understand where we came from. And that's why I want to start with the past. So I have here a slide. I'm quickly showing all the icons here. If you don't see them, that's not the big issue. But this here is more important about the way how these icons or the logos of the various frameworks and libraries are grouped together. So we see kind of in the year 2004, there was this term of Ajax Web 2.0, where the front-end development, as we know it, more or less started. And at the time, for the first 5 years or so, you really had the impression that every year, or maybe even every month, a new framework came up, and it replaced almost the older one. So I have here just a list of some that I've been working with. So Prototype, Spectaculous was more or less the first one. Then of course jQuery, XJS, Dojo. So quite a lot of things came out. And the problem, at least the way I experienced it during that time, was really if you started a project at that time, you were not really sure if you need to rewrite it with a different framework next year or how long it will stay like this. And It changed a little bit in 2010 when we saw, I would say, the new generation of front-end frameworks appeared. First one was Angular, then afterwards came React and Vue. What changed that time was that even today, we see that these three frameworks, they have never been replaced like the others were. It's still that people start to use, or when you're starting a new application, you're going to use Angular, React, or Vue, but it still stays the same. And the question, of course, now is why is that the case? Are there no innovations, or what's going on? And in a way, it reminds me of something that we also have in tennis. There is this notion of the big three, and this is very similar to what we have in the front-end world. I mean, these are the top three players in the world that are dominating the sport for quite some time now. And I mean, again, it's not that new tennis players come up or that nobody plays tennis. That's not the point. But nobody can beat them or challenge them. And this is what I see in the three JavaScript frameworks here as well. And the question, of course, is why. And if you look, I mean, what's going on? There is a lot of going on at the moment. And if you try to find out what the majority of the frameworks libraries are trying to do, the new ones, then you see it's more or less all about the speed. So everything what we want to do is that we want to become faster. And in order to become faster, well, that's very easy how we can do that. I mean, it's that easy, but it's not done very easy. We can run faster or we can run less. So run faster is more or less very simple. I don't even have a slide for that. And what can you do? Well, you can say you want to replace JavaScript with a language which is a compiled language. At the moment, I don't think that this will happen. I mean, we had WebAssembly a few years ago. Some people thought WebAssembly might replace JavaScript, although the WebAssembly guys themselves, they said this is not their plan. They are not going to replace it. And we can be very sure that JavaScript will stay as the programming language that we use in web applications. But that said, we will quite for certain see that the tooling will change. So the tooling, these are the things that don't run in the browser. And there we see a huge benefit or a huge increase in terms of speed when we change the programming language. And just to give you some examples with WeTest or even ESBuild, we just see new tools that are run in different programming languages, and they are just faster. We can also do something in terms of the rendering. Yes, this is always possible. People, framework authors, they can always optimize there a little bit, but that's it. I see the more interesting part coming in the run less approach. So this means that we are trying to be smarter, that our frameworks try to be smarter, and in the end, it also means that we should try to reduce the bundle size of JavaScript. Doesn't mean that we need to skip some features, that's not the case, but just in a very intelligent way, trying to reduce the bundle size of JavaScript. This means I don't need to run a lot of JavaScript, which is, of course, faster. And there are two approaches. The first one is, again, we can say we want to reduce the framework's code. It's not us, but this is something that the framework has to do. And we can take this to the very extreme. So when we take a look at the normal web application, normal flow, we would say, well, there is a user. The user enters the web page, and then the user clicks on some button or something like this. And then this DOM event is passed on, and there is some framework which is waiting for that and is then reacting against this event. And the framework alone doesn't do anything. The framework is just there, but it doesn't really know what it should do now. And this is where our code comes into the game. And the problem now is that, I mean, this is very, very roughly speaking, the framework itself and our code, you can really say they meet each other for the very first time in the browser. So you can really think like, the web application starts, the framework is there, our code is also there, and then the framework needs to find out what we actually want to do. So if you say you want to do some kind of a race and you have now the start signal, it really is like You can't start running. First of all, you need to check where you have to go to. And in some way, this is also what we see here. And, well, I mean, in the end, of course, it works. That's not the problem. The DOM is being updated according to our rules. That's not the point here. But the problem is more or less, first, this interpretation takes some time. And second, of course, these frameworks, they tend, of course, to be large. There is a reason why this symbol here is more or less towards Angular. But nevertheless, we can say there is a significant amount in size coming from these frameworks. And there is one approach which is really genius, I would say. And this always comes up when you say you try to analyze your problem. You try to find another space where the problems or where the patterns are more or less very similar, and then you try to apply the solutions that they might already have to our space here. And as you see, I'm using here the word interpret, and this already counts or signals a little bit that if we compare it with programming languages again, then we have already more or less the solution. We know from programming languages that the interpreted languages tend to be smaller than the compiled ones, and the idea now would be that we try to compile that here as well. Of course, we cannot replace JavaScript. This is not the point here. We're just trying to transform the solution from the programming languages and apply it to our case. So the idea here would be that we say, well, the runtime, we can see kind of the framework as a runtime, and that we say, okay, what if the framework is not part or is not the runtime anymore? What if the framework is already generating the code that it would execute during the runtime when it starts interpreting all that stuff? And so this is more or less this approach. And I have here some pseudocode. What if we would say, well, instead of, if you take a look at the right side, instead of us requiring to come up with some kind of structure that is describing our components or whatever, what if the structure is not required? What if the compiled code just says, well, you want to have a component that contains a button? Well, then I just hit the command document create element, and that's it. I don't need to analyze your model. I don't even need your model in the runtime anymore. That's not necessary. And of course, with this approach, some other things are not necessary, because you don't need the complete overhead. For example, in React, the virtual DOM, these things are not really required anymore, because it's quite clear what we want to do from the very startup. And this is, of course, a huge thing if you can come up with that, and we have this already. So we have this, I have here these two frameworks, Svelte and Solid. They are doing this in some way. Maybe I've missed some others, sorry for that. But this is what they do. They really try to be a compiler. During the build time, they are generating the code optimized, and they are not required anymore during the runtime. So what we end up with is that we have a very small bundle. The framework is not in the browser anymore, and yes, it also runs faster in general. This is also something we see. So this is about reducing the framework. So this is something the framework has to do. Question is if Angular, Vue, and React can do this. And the next thing, and this is the more interesting one, is reducing our code. So we say, okay, is there some way how we can reduce our own code and still keep the functionality by even keeping the framework? And all the existing approaches that we have at the moment, they're all based on server-side rendering. So this is a requirement. This is something that we don't even discuss anymore. Because with server-side rendering, of course, you have here this first phase where you say you are generating static code. I mean, server-side rendering is not nothing new. Is not something new. But the point here is, in the first phase, you don't have any JavaScript at all. It's just HTML and CSS. The problem, of course, is that this page is static. It's not interactive. And then comes the second phase, the hydration phase, where we say we are loading the application into the browser. Then the components realize themselves more as they are becoming activated, and the page is now interactive. And this now is the area of innovation, as I would like to call it. in the hydration, how we are going to do that. There are a lot of approaches at the moment that try to make this efficient as possible. What can we do? We could say, well, we have something which I call just-in-time hydration. So this means I don't hydrate at all. Well, the HTML, my web application is still static, but there is some small portion of JavaScript inside of my web application, and it is listening for certain user events. And when I click on a button or something, then this JavaScript knows which component is related to this and starts lazily loading that component. And then only the part that really needs to be interactive is more or less interactive, and I don't need the complete bundle, more or less. In my opinion, that's the hardest. The other part is that we say hydrate only interactive components. So maybe I have some components where it's not required to re-render them because they are just rendered once, and then there is no need for them to become interactive. And this is where at the moment, where I would say this is React Server components are very important because they can actually do this. So if you say you have a component, you say, please, you run on the server, you fetch all the data or do whatever is necessary, but in the end, I expect HTML and CSS. This is what I place into the web application, into the browser, and since it's non-interactive, I don't need to provide the JavaScript for that anymore. And the last thing is more or less like a compromise. Maybe I say, well, there are different tasks a component need to do. I mean, this is also something that server components is trying to enforce upon us. But we could say, well, we want still to keep this one component, and we say, maybe I want to do the loading part of my data on the server. There will be an interactive part, but this is then executed on the browser. This is the JavaScript that I deploy to the browser, and this is, again, a good measure to, of course, to reduce the bundle size. All of that, of course, most of them they are relying that we have something like code splitting. So in Angular, it would be lazy loading. Because otherwise, if we say we are loading parts of our application into the browser, we don't want to load everything, but only the things that are really required because of the round that we have or something similar. So this is something which I would say it's not the same as the 3 measures, but it's a requirement that we still have. Yeah, and in the agenda, you might have read that React Server components is mentioned, but I decided to show you something else. I mean, I'm just going to pick one of the many representatives that we currently have that are trying to deal or innovate in this area. And I tried to choose a framework which is very trendy at the moment, which also has the potential to be used in other frameworks, not just in React itself, and which is already ready for production, and that's Remix. And what Remix does, it follows the 3rd measure. So what Remix says, OK, you have components. These components, some of them, they will require to load some data from the backend. And this is what I'm going to do. I will just run the data fetching in the backend and not in the front end. And when I first read this, I thought, well, OK, what's the issue? I mean, if I have an optimized API and I say the API is only returning the data that I need, why do I need to fetch it on the server? The data is more or less always transported to the browser, but that's not all of it. You also have a big advantage, or something that we don't maybe consider that often, that there might be a lot of dependencies when it comes to data fetching. We have GraphQL, we have Open APIs, these are all huge libraries. Maybe state management, not always, but there are some applications which are really only using state management for more or less using the data as some kind of cache. And of course, if you're doing some data transformation, validation, there are also some libraries you might want to use as well. And they also fall into this category that they are not required on the client. They are only required for a data fetching process. So if, and not just if, this is the case at the moment, when these dependencies are also run on the server, then immediately your bundle size is again reduced, and you only end up with the part that is required for the user interaction. And that's it, more or less. Again, if you look at the tutorials at Remix, I think the most significant change or the impact that they are mentioning is that it is really fast. Yes, I mean, I come from an Angular world. Maybe the type of applications that we find there is a little bit different. I don't see the speed as the major advantage. I see more or less the reduction of the dependencies, and that's why I included it here. But yeah, I mean, it's very fast. And here again, we see some code. This is how a component could look like. And you see there is one function at the beginning, which is the loader function. And this is the function that is executed on the server. And what React does, it knows that this component is loaded because Remix knows that this component is loaded. It runs this code on the server. It waits until this code is executed, is finished, and then it sends the rest of the component, which is only the interactive part, because I don't need to fetch data anymore, along the data or the response of this loader function to the browser, and that's it, more or less. And, well, just running out of time. There are different approaches, as I mentioned. I have here a list of the current ones. We have the big competitor of Remix is more or less Next.js. We also have React Server Components, and Quick is more or less following the first measure, where I say this is more or less I wait and I only start or I lazy load all the things when they are really required. This is extremely hard, and as far as I know, at this conference there is also a talk about Quick. So if you're interested in that, I would really recommend that you go there. And then we also have Astra, Marco, and yeah, maybe some I didn't mention here. But they're all trying to solve this problem in the area of hydration, so to say, or reducing bundle size. So not the final summary, but what can we now really expect? So definitely the tools, they will be replaced by new versions written not in JavaScript with Go, Rust. So this is something, yeah, I would bet quite a lot for that. We see it already that people also in Angular are already requesting compatibility for Vite. Angular is also working, of course, on ES-Build. We have it already in the latest version, and this will just increase. JavaScript, I think that stays untouched, so I think nobody of us needs to be afraid to learn a new language, although I think it's not a bad thing, but the skills, they stay. Zero-size frameworks, this is a question mark for me, because it's not something that few React or Angular can. It's a different framework, and the question is always, do we really want to switch an existing framework for something else just because we have zero-size frameworks, when, on the other side, we also have these things like reducing bundle size or more or less going back to the backend. And I think this is definitely something that we will see more and more in the future. Also, Angular has already announced that they want to invest something in that, and we will become more or less developers that also need to do something in the backend. So maybe database would be a good thing to learn right now. Last minute, what should we do now? Should you throw everything away and maybe adopt to Solid or whatever? No, don't do this. Keep calm and carry on. Really do it, because there is one important thing that you always have to remember. There is a huge difference in terms of reality and perception. Just because everybody speaks of a new framework, it doesn't mean that that everybody is using. Yesterday, I just had a discussion with somebody who said, if I'm using Rust because he's so interested, and he never ever met any developer that was using Rust, but you hear it all the time. And this is what we see here as well. So these are the results from a survey taken this year about asking developers what frameworks are they most interested in. And you see here Svelte, Solid on place number 1 and 2. Angular is last but one. So if I'm an Angular developer and I would look at these results, I would say it's time to look out for a new job. But again, this is just a perception. This is only what I'm interested in, what I would like to do. This is not what the reality really is, because the reality looks completely different. We see really that React, Angular, and Vue are the top 3 frameworks. There are 20% for Svelte. This is already something, but I kind of question the representation of this sample that they used, because there is also another statistics which shows even a clearer image, and these are the download statistics. And if we look at them, you clearly see that the green color is more or less React, so this is far away from everything else. We have Vue and Angular, so this is still used. But if it comes to any other framework we see, compared to the three ones, to the big three, it's more or less, nothing. So again, we will have a Q&A session now. That's why I have to quit. This Beyond Java book, just a sentence. Please stay with the existing frameworks. They have the time. I think we are at the stage at the moment where they are so big that they can afford to look what the others are doing, and they will see if something is good. They will adopt it into their own way. So it's just a matter of time. If it's good, it will eventually come. OK. And, well, as I said, we are running out of time. We still have a Q&A. That would be the end of it. Thank you very much for joining, of course, and ask some questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a few questions from the audience, but we won't have time for all of them. So there is one question about, could the big three change to compiler approach without developers need to change their code? Could React, Angular,
Yes, is the microphone on? Yes.
Yeah.
This is very interesting. I mean, Angular has a compiler, but I mean, theoretically, yes, it could be the case that they change, but we are all developers, so we all know when we say it theoretically it's possible, what this means in practice. So maybe not. I don't know. This is something you have to ask the framework developers. I doubt it for the next few years. Let's put it like this.
And do you think Svelte will play a major role in the future?
To be honest, I mean, this is just my belief. I don't think so. Because it really is, when we are looking at the download statistics, you see that we have the three major frameworks. We have also other possibilities to make code faster, to reduce the bundle size. I see that if they don't manage to apply the compiler approach because it's too complicated, they will go the way that we see currently with Remix or something like this. And if you have that, I think maybe compiler is not really necessary anymore.
I see. So one more question. With server components in React, are front-end developer moving to be more of a full-stack developer?
It depends. I mean, you can also say you have a backend for front-end, so this means that you're still not writing your actual APIs. You have just part of the JavaScript running on the server, which is communicating with your backend. Then I wouldn't define you as a backend developer, but I would say if you today start a new application where you say, yes, we start with a backend framework like a Remix or React Server Components, then it's very likely that you just say, OK, you just write the API in Remix as well. So then you are a full-stack developer, yes, I would say.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you very much
Welcome.
for attending the session. Thank you, Rainer, for a great talk. Our next session will be in 5 minutes, so take refreshment and be back. And see you soon.